one thing that even John Harmon couldn't do was give us a decent football team to put in it. And credit to Derby for what you've achieved this season. But what he was very good at was getting the press, the media off the back of the town as well. Which I don't know what the situation's like in Derby, but in many towns I go to, the media can play a corrosive effect, have a corrosive effect on a town. And to win the media over to what the town was trying to achieve was one of his first steps. This is just briefly the path that we followed over 20 years. I'm not going to go in any detail. It's some familiar things there. The important thing was a lot of it was done before the National Lottery, before regional government, before corporate performance assessment. And I might say a little bit more about this later, because the ability for Harmon and Hughes to be innovative, to strike out, to do things that nobody had done before, they could do in the early 90s. I don't know whether they would be allowed to do it in the current climate that we're in of performance assessment and regional and sub-regional government. I'll leave that with you. Maybe it's something we can discuss at the end. But what happened? I said you had a tired old establishment, a political, cultural, business establishment that really hadn't a clue what the future held for Huddersfield. And what Harmon initiated was pressure from the top in terms of new political leadership, but also opened the door for pressure from the bottom, from the voluntary sector, from small private sector organisations who didn't have much in terms of resource, but had a hell of a lot of optimism and energy. What we also was important in Huddersfield, I think, was what the university brought. Not as an institution, because as I'll say in a minute, the university was a pretty poor organisational model at that time. But what any university does bring in is people, is ideas, a ready and freshly replenished supply of people bringing in energy. And that was important right from the start in Huddersfield. And I said to Harmon after he retired, I said, well, what do you think, in a nutshell, was your secret? What did you achieve in that time? And he said that for every penny of power that he gave away, he traded a pound of creative influence. And I think that is his secret, and the courage for any politician to actually do that, to give something away and to trade it for something bigger, is the challenge that anybody in power has to come to terms with. It was hard work. Quite a few of us have lost a bit of hair since that time, but it's nice to see that people have grown and gone on to bigger things. But let me just put Huddersfield's problem in a nutshell now, which was, it was bleeding people. Population was falling, and particularly the vital sectors of the population from which new growth could occur. And so our strategy was, how do we make Huddersfield sticky? How do we make it a place that when people come, they want to stay? Certainly we want to encourage people to leave. You want people at 18, 20 to see the world. But how are you going to embed something in there that says at some point in their life, I'm going to take my talent back to my hometown and I'm going to make something of it there rather than somewhere else? And so our strategy was to build a community, a creative community, a cluster of related functions. All of these functions existed in some way or another in the town. The radical thing was getting them to work in synergy. And it's not such a radical thing, you might think, to say that you've got a university there, and you've got what we call our media centre, the development of our quarter of media businesses. And what's that? Quarter of a mile, half a mile at the most? And yet we have this Berlin Wall of a ring road, and no interaction at all between the university and between the businesses that needed it. And so that became our challenge. And I recall that Charles Landry and I was working at the council at the time, and Charles was was working in consultancy for us, had just been to a particularly dispiriting meeting with the university. I'm sorry if there's anybody from universities here, but you'll know as well as anybody how difficult it is to deliver a university. You may have 101 people in that university who want to sign up to a project, but herding them all in the same direction to work together with partners outside is one hell of a job. And we thought, how can we explain to the university and to everybody else in Huddersfield that what we're trying to do is not just something for a few arty-farties, for a few people who've read Richard Florida or whatever, but it's something for the whole town. How can we explain to people where they fit in, where they can make their contribution, and what they can get out of it? And it was out of that despair and frustration that we created this model, the cycle of creativity, around which everything we subsequently did in Huddersfield was located. And I'm going to take you through this model, not particularly to look at Huddersfield, but maybe look at it as a model that might unlock a few thoughts for yourself about Derby. The cycle begins with ideas generation. What do you do in a place like Huddersfield, where for 100 years people have been told, do your job, keep your nose clean, keep your trap shut, and you'll do all right? How do you suddenly generate ideas when people know that ideas are dangerous, ideas are risky? And so, these are the kinds of things that places need. The creation of informal creative spaces, and planned ones too. Yes, it's possible to plan a place and hope that people will come to be creative there, but it's the places that people just naturally gather in, and it's having a planning regulatory system that is flexible enough to cope with all of those. Having an educational system, a school system, which actually encourages curiosity and exploration at the heart. An open political atmosphere, and this is where Harman was so important. He basically said, he gave us the permission to be argumentative, to debate, to have open discussions. Challenging art, research functions, organised debating forums. These are all to sort of greater or lesser extent things we've tried in Huddersfield and things I know that other places try too. They're all concerned with raising the level of energy, getting the blood flowing, getting people out and arguing. And a lot of it is quite painful to start with. And a lot of places I go to that say they've got problems because they're avoiding one thing: conflict. They dread conflict at all costs. They'll go around it, they'll go back, they'll go up, they'll go down. They won't deal with conflict. But conflict is a natural part of our life, increasingly, as we're more and more diverse. And so it should be. A creative city manages conflict. But at some point, one needs to turn ideas into practice. People need the opportunity to try something out, to prototype. Just to try something out. Maybe it's rubbish, maybe it's crap. Maybe it was never going to work. But until you've done it and tried it, you'll never know. And so many of our projects in Huddersfield were concerned with giving people the space to try something out. Providing expert advice and mentoring, planning, incubation facilities. Small amounts of money, and I say small, because too much money can be worse than no money at all, killing a project. What we've done particularly in Huddersfield, and this is where we've been able to bring the university in, and the university really has a role to play now, is in the creation of a whole system now of creative incubation. And I won't take you through this, but in essence, it's a series of pathways now that people are able to opt in and out of at different stages in their career, whether they're graduates of the university, whether they've never been to university in their life. People are able to pop into different services, different virtual or physical incubation facilities.